Okay, good evening. Welcome to the first installment of our District Advisory Committee meetings. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the California budget and how it relates to some of the work we do in our LCAP, but really the focus is about the relationship between budgeting and the state 8 priorities. Before I get rolling into our festivities, I did want to announce congratulations to our district on top of winning the very prestigious Golden Bell Award in Strategic Planning in the Common Core era. It was announced today that we were also given a $1,000 scholarship from the Associate Business Affiliates as part of that award. So we'll put that in our district foundation and find a good way to spend the money. So when I arrived here, everybody's heard about the Penguin book by now. It's a book about district-wide data teams, and have a district data team, kind of a staff data team, and then a site data team. And we've been rolling out, I think, very well all of our individual school sites through our teacher collaboration time. But the one thing that's been missing is really having a district advisory committee that analyzes data on a macro level and kind of looks at the plan. And then over the last couple of years, the creation of the LCAP has kind of taken forefront, and so it's this plan to kind of follow the model in this book, which is by McNulty and Besser, called Leaders Make It Happen. Where tonight's really the first ever effort to be able to get into that a little bit, because the plan is in place. We're going to just take a look at some of the things that our data should be producing. So the goal tonight is not to spend, to get into the deep in the weeds and really deep into what we're doing, but really looking at the budget, how it relates to our analysis over the next months in terms of the programs we identified and the measurables that come with it. So with that said, most of us have seen this video, but I think that it kind of, I call it scratching our head. I think it's a metaphor for the Common Core era and what people are being asked to do at the state, county, district, site, and teaching classroom level. So I like to liken us as the gentleman in the coat and the state as Ma and Pa Kettle in this analogy. In that, some great ideas, Common Core, increased rigor, higher order thinking skills, at a time where they roll out a new statewide funding formula, a statewide accountability plan, a statewide standards rollout, and a brand new assessment all at the same time. So we are scratching our head, trying to figure out things as we go. But in the end, I think it's a nice analogy to how people look at things and perspectives. This is a picture of an eclipse. And then as the moon gets away from the shadow of the sun, it comes to light. So very quickly, most of you are familiar with this information, but the local control funding formula replaced the Serrano case equalization era that began in 1972. And so this is really the new state formula of something that hadn't changed since Governor Brown was governor the first time. And so just quickly, there are 4 areas of funding based on students' grade. There are 3 categories of funding: a base grant, a supplemental grant, and a concentration grant. There are additional monies that come in for class size reduction and additional monies that come in for career technical ed in the high school 912 program. So we, as a district, have also to address the 3 categories of students: low income, English learners, and foster youth. And every district's allocation of monies in supplemental grant are based on how many low income English learner and foster youth each district has. And if you have a district of large numbers of low income English learners and foster youth that exceed 55% of the total population, any students above and beyond 55% gets additional concentration grant funding. If you notice, our district gets $0 for that because our numbers of ELs and low-income students are very low. So this is how the new funding formula works. This is how we pay our bills. And the other thing with it is that the strings attached approach of the old system, which is you get money for this program, money for this program, money for this program, and you have to spend it on it, The local control philosophy is, here's what you get in one pot of money, and you get to choose locally how you want to spend your money. Wink, wink. And then the government says, here's what you need to spend your money on. Deferred maintenance needs to be taken out of that. STR's retirement contribution needs to be taken out. So on a face value, this is what it's intended to be. The Sacramento will continue to reach into our pot and take things, which has been their practice all along. When you talk about targeting funding populations, though, the three communities that are addressed here, Stockton, Tracy, and Lammersville, kind of tells the story of where the money goes and what the governor's intent is. So I was being a little sarcastic earlier. I want to be respectful here. His intent is to take care of kids who come from places with no means. And so in Stockton, students that would benefit from supplemental or concentration grant, the total population of students is 90%. In Tracy, it's 56%. And in our district, it's 25%. So when you think about funding, and there's some frustrations that come when you're in a district where you know you're only going to get additional funding for 1 out of 4 students, it limits what you can do. But when you also look at the student populations in neighborhoods in Stockton on the south side, on the east side, on the northwest side, those are multiple family dwelling communities, apartment complexes, projects, from the 1960s, duplexes, triplexes. You get some very serious issues that go along with high poverty communities. So there are benefits or ways of looking at each community and why it gets funded, but that's essentially an explanation of how our district and all districts in California are being funded. Now here's our reality, is we have to do more with less. We have to meet the state mandates. We have to transition to Common Core. We have to create 21st century classrooms. We have to do all of that, but we have to do it in an environment where we get less money. This is the LCFF funding distribution target, which maxes out in 2021. And as you can see, Lammersville is at the bottom of the list in terms of allocations from the state. If you were to look at the test scores, it would flip, and our test scores put us at the top. So it's important to note that socioeconomic status of the communities in which schools resides, research is showing, has a very powerful impact on student outcomes. So when you talk about LCAP and LCFF, this gap in funding is pretty powerful. So when you look at the amount of allocations per students we get less than our other districts in our community and our county, you can see by child in this list, and in total for the district in this list, what the gap would be in a district of 3,374 students. We are presently at 4,087 students, so these numbers are already bigger. But the idea is we still have to figure it out, scratching our head, as the first video showed, on how we're going to do this, and we do it through a plan. Yes, sir. You have to talk in the microphone, Mr. Pombo.
I think everyone can hear me. My question was, that $9 million, or almost just a few dollars shy of $10 million at the top for Stockton, that's not the extra revenue that they get. That's what we would get if we were, the extra we would get.
Correct.
If we were funded at their level.
So this is the gap if we were the same size district. Stockton has 38,000 plus students, so imagine what that number really is. On top of, they get large amounts of Title I, Title II, Title III dollars, which are all federal dollars that go for poverty, English learners, and the like. So it's an excellent point that this would just be for a district this size. Okay, so the things that we have to consider are all of these factors. So when we put together our budget, when we built our LCAP, when the strategic plan was created, which has become the LCAP, all of these factors, student growth, a rapidly growing community, 21st century classrooms and skills, all of the educational factors that go in with taking care of our teachers' needs, our staff needs, and professional development, technology and the infrastructure. And though all of our schools are less than 12 years old, except for one, we just made a huge investment in upgrading switches and adding access points. So even though we're considered a high-tech district, that stuff grandfathers out and gets old quickly. So all of the things that go into making our district what it is, it's this list, including unfunded mandates from the state, which has to be considered as we develop our LCAP and in how we spend our money and how we measure the success of our programs. So rapid growth, essentially we're a 4 districts. In 13-14 we had 4 schools. In 14-15 we jumped to 6. And probably 17-18, 18-19 we'll be building another school. We went from 91 teachers to presently 185 in a very short 3-year period or 4-year period, and we're projecting 200 teachers. And finally, from 2,428 students to, that number's already changed again, 4,087, and we're projecting 4,500. So these numbers grow, but our allocation is low in terms of how we compete with our neighboring districts. So we have to take care of all these kids, hire teachers and take care of their needs, and we have to do so with the same pot of money. So the money that we talk about is, every business is like this, but benefits and salaries are in the blue for both classified and certificated employees. Operating costs of the district are in the green, and then LCAP basically absorbs most of the, or identified through most of the red piece of the pie there. Some salary, some benefits, but for the most part, what we're talking about, what we have discretion on in terms of LCFF is really in the red pie. So the relationship between the LCAP and the strategic plan is important, and this is kind of the role of the district advisory committee. So we have to measure and identify program effectiveness through the state priorities, the 5 areas of concentration for our strategic plan. But then we have to monitor the programs that we say we're going to do and be able to say it's working or it's not working. We have to talk about program sustainability and long-term planning. An example of that is our 5-year technology sustainability plan. Our district puts money aside every year to be able to afford things like additional computers. 2 years ago we were 1-to-1 in the high school. Now we're 1-to-1 in 7-8. Our hope is to be 1-to-1 4-6 next year, and ultimately by 2018 be 1-to-1 district-wide. But in order to do that, A, you have to be able to afford it, and B, you have to save to be able to afford it. So these are the kind of things we have to think about and talk about in terms of our LCAP. And then ultimately, what are the programs we still have to create? We have to create an alternative ed program at the high school. Are we going to have a sustainable summer school program for students? Are we going to consider summer school for high school students as enrichment or just credit recovery? All of these conversations are what we need to look at the data and as a district advisory committee talk about the pros and cons, phased rollouts, what we need to put off for another year, all of those things. And then ultimately, communication and feedback to all of our stakeholders in our community and the budget and our limitations with the budget as well. So 30 years in review. So in 1983, and I reference this because the video clip you're about to watch is from a movie from my senior year, 1984. And so A Nation at Risk came out and said the way we were educating our kids was going to lead us to failure as a nation. And so it was the beginning of consideration for high-stakes testing. By 2000, that morphed into No Child Left Behind, where true high-stakes testing was invented, ultimately which was supposed to lead to every child is advanced and proficient in 2014, but they really killed the system in 2012 with the onset of the Common Core state standards. So I'm going to ask that we're going to have a tabletop conversation. It breaks out pretty nice with 3, 3, 3, 3, and 2. And I'm going to ask that you look. There are actually 4 classrooms referenced, but I'm only going to ask you to pay attention to 3. There's one classroom where they're fixing a heater, one classroom where there's ditto being passed out. There's one classroom where there's classroom management, might be a consideration for some improvement. But the question I'd like you to talk about in your table talk activity is what are the possibilities that students in these classrooms will achieve, and what would the Common Core state standards, CAAS, and other data sources do to assist those programs, those teachers, in getting data to tell them that their program is working? Any questions on that? I do have, in the manila folders, a thing that says table talk activity, so when we're done, you won't need a prompt because the prompt was created for you. So those of you that have that in front of you, you'll be passing something out here in a second. So we're going to go, this is from the movie Teachers from 1984. The idea here is if you go back to English learners, foster youth, and low-income students, this is an urban high school, I believe in Chicago. This is a nation at risk. This is kind of an indictment on the system back in the day. But the idea is that the state is saying that if we don't find some way to intentionally deal with the low-income foster youth and English learners in today's educational environment, then there's something going on. So the quality of teaching in today's classrooms is significantly better than what you just saw. However, the table talk question is, what are the possibilities that students will achieve in that classroom, and what would something like the Common Core, CAAS, or other data sources do to assist this process? Any questions on the question? Go ahead and talk for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll share out. The movie, it's a little melodramatic, but it does have some funny scenes, and the scene where Mr. Ditto meets his demise is really funny. So anyways, with that said, so would anybody like to share their thoughts from their table talk activity about what are the possibilities that students in the Fix the Heater classroom will achieve? Not. I think sometimes it's better said with one word. Just everybody take a moment. Not. Is that K-N-O-T? So what's going on with Nick Nolte's class? Why won't the students achieve?
That's HVAC technical knowledge.
It is. But he's sold as the guy that relates to kids really well, so he can get them to learn, and then he's using his time to teach how to fix the radiator, which is a practice. Yeah, Brian.
Probably just like no accountability, I'd imagine. You know, if it doesn't look like there's any expectation that anything besides heater repair or some other fun, activities might come out of that class.
Anybody else?
It's also the part where, yes, the students may be engaged, but what's happening in the classroom is aligned to the standards, and which is supposed to be apparently social studies in that class and not engineering, so we are not really sure.
All right, let's take a look at Mr. Rosenberg's class. He's the classroom management guy. What are the odds of that students will be able to achieve there?
We talked about the fact that exposure does not equal engagement, which does not equal performance.
Nice.
Although they were exposed, none of the other components were there.
Okay, good. Anyone else in Mr. Rosenberg's class? All right, ditto. In a scene later on in the movie, he says, I've won awards for the best classroom management in the district 6 times running or something like that. But what's going on in that classroom that has to do with achievement? So those things are important because it's this era that kind of led people to start saying, well, what are we trying to do? And that led to standards. Standards led to tests. Tests led to fallibility of tests and the good things in tests. So can the Common Core state standards help this school? Can the CAAS? Would other data sources help these folks? Sharon.
I would say yes, because it's on. Because there would be the expectation of the evidence of the standards being taught and English learner strategies that you have focus from your LCFF on making sure that that's being implemented in the classroom.
Anyone else? Jenna?
We talked about the fact that in all 3 of the classrooms, just data wasn't acknowledged or even available to even look at for reflection. And so just the idea of even getting data, beginning means of it or more, advanced means of data is something.
Anyone else? Excellent. Okay, the reason why that's important is, hopefully you'll see a relationship, is the state has identified its data sources. There are 8 state priorities, and I'm not going to read them to you. We're going to actually kind of look at it from a different perspective. But we're being asked by the state to identify data out of these 8 areas. And then we put on ourselves, through our strategic plan, 5 areas, which are fall within those same categories. So we, in our LCAP, have identified areas where we're measuring things. And when you take a look at the goals, when I pass those out in a little bit, you'll see that we've already kind of identified in our baseline LCAP year what we think we can find in the data. So this 8 state priorities, these are just some of the areas. I won't read all of this, but these are all areas where we can generate and gather information or data to say this is working, this is not working, this is happening, this is not happening. The Williams settlement, Common Core, parent involvement, pupil achievement, which you can see all kinds of things in that category. engagement, and I want to emphasize this point. When they say engagement in Lammersville Unified School District, we're talking about strategies where kids are leaning forward, they're actively engaged, they're doing things, their mind are wrapped into what they're doing, and they're excited about learning. The state has identified it from the opposite perspective, which is absenteeism, tardiness, dropout rates, graduation rates. So when the state is looking at its data, it's really looking at a place that's wholly different than our district. But nonetheless, we have to put out that information. School climate, we talk about carnivals and we talk about teacher collaboration time where teachers are sharing idea and lesson planning. But the state is looking for expulsion rates and suspension rates and other measures. So they're really looking at the state of California education system from a prism that's not reflective in our world. And that's not bad or good. That just says that you can kind of start to see a relationship between the funding and where it's going and what the state intends the money to do, which is to make those numbers go away or significantly be reduced. Okay, so quick activity, another discussion. We're going to stay in our table talk groups. But in the manila folders, there is a handout, which Brian will hold up with his left hand. This has the 8 priorities and really what the state, some of the measurables that the state has. Each manila folder has some copies of those. If you'll pass one to each person to your left and right. And then the intention is, I think I have enough that we're going to do groups of 2. So in the manila folder also is a different paper with a handwritten letters on the upper left-hand corner. Everybody has that. All right, I'll go slow. So Brian, when you hold that up real quick so I can see. Yeah, exactly. Go every 2, just pass one out. It's going to give you a topic, so don't try to decipher my penmanship. Just trust me, it'll work out. So what I'd like to do and what I'm calling this is mapping the purpose of the 8 state priorities. So with your partner, in the upper left-hand corner, you're going to have the letters EL, FY, or LI. So if you have an EL, you're going to look at these questions and prompts from the perspective exclusively of English learners in the state of California. And you're going to look at it from the 8 state priorities and what the state's measuring and how that might impact students who fall in that category. If you have an FY, that's foster youth. And if you have LI, that's low income. So the idea is you're going to discuss the purpose of the state priorities in relationship to your student group's educational experience. And think about why did the state choose those areas to measure? Is there something that we're not doing right or we're doing right for foster youth, for English learners, for low-income students? And then what impact will producing successful outcomes with these students groups have on our district, San Joaquin County, and California? Any questions? The questions that I just read to you are on the back of the sheet with the lettering on it. So we'll take about 5 minutes or so to discuss the 2 prompts. Any questions on the questions? So why don't we go ahead and just kind of take a look. The intent of the activity was really imagining what it would be like if all of this data shifted around and numbers for low-income students go up. English learners get reclassified and are successful in the mainstream program. Our most needy kids, foster youth, are in schools where they feel safe. They have a stable environment and they're able to learn. So in relationship to what the state's trying to accomplish for these groups, what did your table talk or your partner conversation identify as areas to improve their educational experience or impactful stuff? Debbie?
So I think one of the things that I found striking is that here in Lammersville Unified, there's not a have and a have not environment. So we're
regardless, we had limited income. Regardless of your income level, you have the same opportunities with facilities, materials, et cetera, for programs. So I saw that as very positive for our students.
Thank you. Jenna?
We had English language learners, and we were talking about the, identifying what their needs are and giving them support without taking away their access to like, other electives or other things that provide them access to, a lot of the courses that were listed in here, their visual performing arts and things like that.
So imagine back in the CST era, this happened to a lot of English learners and low-income kids. They would be in their mainstream class, then they'd get the pull-out class where they'd get additional time of ELA and math. And then if they were an English learner, then they would be pulled again to do their 30 minutes of daily English learner time. And by the time you got to the end of the day, you basically had English language arts 3 times, math twice, PE, and lunch. So what is the incentive for a kid like that living in that environment? So the nice thing about local control is we can identify those areas. In terms of what would be the impact if successfully transitioning, let me say that better. If student outcomes are successful and the money that goes to support foster youth, English learners, and low-income students, what is that? What the impact? I think Debbie kind of hit it for LUSD, but what about San Joaquin County and what about California? Tara?
We were talking about how here at Lammersville, we could be, for San Joaquin County, we want to bring our county up, and people could come to us and look at what we're doing and replicate it in other places. And then for the state of California, we want to make sure that we're providing an excellent public education, because I don't know about this area, but we have a lot of charters that come in and try to take hold in our districts. And so by providing a strong academic program for all our groups, we can support California in that way.
All right, good. Anyone else?
To piggyback on what Tara was saying, is that we could raise the average for LUSD, for San Joaquin County, for the state, the bottom, there'll always be a bottom, but the bottom will be higher, and we can focus more on the intervention needs, because the intervention groups would hopefully be smaller.
And also, as the bottom raises, it pushes the top up as well.
Which increases how many kiddos are college and career ready. And if we're talking about our subgroups here, that's a situation that's a concern. And so the higher we build their performance and support them, the more college and career ready kiddos we have.
We also talked about the parent involvement. The amount of parent involvement that we have in our community, in our school district, is huge. And we did talk about focusing specifically on our EL students and our low-income students, identifying those kids and really going out of our way to involve more parents from those subgroups is critical for us. But we talk, let's continue to work on, but our parents are really involved, and that's a huge thing for our district.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Actually, this is the most important thing, that the parents' involvement is a must. Why? Because no doubt some parents may be, as we have understood, that low income, maybe some, at the same time, the parents who are having low income and their kids are not sufficient in learning the English, then the involvement and occasionally the meeting with the parents is a must. Why? When we look at our homes, when we need something to do, and perhaps we may have the lacking in our budget, then we look around the parents who has low income. Naturally, they'll be looking after their resources. They'll be looking after some relatives, some friends, or somewhere near a neighbor. They can get the help for their kid, and perhaps they can manage, or that can be helpful for learning the process of English life. So I think the parents' involvement and occasionally meeting with the parents, those special parents, whose kids are, they need more attention for the English learning process. They are weak in English. So those two things that I think that's the most important. And if I go back to the just for a minute, I have seen that 84 classrooms, 3 classrooms. Perhaps now we don't have that kind of thing. The most disturbing thing is the discipline. So the discipline is a must. When the discipline is there, the kids can concentrate on the topic only when the discipline is there in the class. If there's no discipline, suppose, then the things go away. So the discipline should be there, discipline of time, discipline of every kind of discipline that makes the things go right way. Thank you.
Anyone else? We should take this little clip and send it up to Sacramento and say, we get it. Okay, so LUSD and the LCFF era, we do have some data to share because we do have some baseline information. We have to look at this year as saying, okay, here's what the numbers we could produce are, and then monitor the program rollout as of all the identifiers within the LCAP. So, always like to slide the best. We still have the highest performing school district in San Joaquin County and in the local area. The districts that we've compared to go from Livermore, Ripon, Manteca, Tracy, Lincoln, and Jefferson. When you look at the state and county on the CAAS, which is the new assessment, we are in the blue, the state is green, the county is orange. When you look at science, blue is us, state and county, and that's 5th, 8th, and 10th grade science. And if you look at the claim targets, and that's a subgroup within the CAAS scores, on the skills, you have areas of reading, writing, speaking, listening, and research and inquiry where 74 to 84% of our kids are at or near the target, and 70 to 79% in math. All in the first time we took it, which is nice. This is way too complicated to explain in every little facet, but what is interesting is the blue is where we're at. The green is where we were supposed to be at. The orange is where we want to be, and the red represents how we will score, or a predictor of how we would score on the CAAS. So if you take a look at the blue on each of the subsequent slides, you're going to see that not only did we come out of the chute early this year with good numbers in reading across grade spans, but we're meeting, exceeding, or closing in on where we're supposed to be at the end of the year. So that's exciting data to look at in terms of reading. You see similar numbers with the good blue in math, red being the end of the year. When you do a site-by-site comparison, you also get the blue, which is beginning of the year, and then the other colors represent the schools and how they're doing. Every school has its own journey. Every year there's going to be a different look at this. I do want to point out with Lammersville scores, when you have a student population that's small, 4 kids can move, and it changes the whole outcome. So they're always going to have greater fluctuations in their outcomes. So that's for reading. That's for math. But again, if you look at it, the blue line is what they're looking to achieve, and our lines from each of our individual school sites by grade are doing just fine. So putting it into perspective, in the California Standards Test era, our final API score, which is the last measure, put us at a district API score of 873, which translates for No Child Left Behind, that 72 and 70, basically 72 again, of our percent of our students in ELA and math were proficient and advanced, which means about 1 out of every 4 kids were not there. That's our achievement gap kids, and I'll identify what groups of kids those are. When you look at the CAAS in our first effort, the state expected us to score 40%. We scored 58 in ELA, 33 in math. We scored 48. That's a lower number here, but again, for the community members, there's no relationship between this. This is a completely different test, more rigorous, more difficult, computer adaptive, a completely different experience. So over the next years, we will make that number shrink and these numbers grow. And we already talked about the claims, but these are also excellent results for each of the individual sub-skills within these scores. So our focus areas were identified in our strategic plan work, but what we know is our non-college educated families, students score less than our college-educated families' kids do. That our achievement gap in our district are made up of low income, English learners, Hispanic, African American, and special education students. So even though we have high scores, these are the kids that don't do as well as other subgroups. And finally, we do have contradictions in our data in that these groups of students, when compared to San Joaquin County subgroups of students, far outpace them, outscore them, but they still represent our Lammersville Unified subgroup. So the state wasn't too far off, even in a high-performing place such as ourselves, the same group of kids need to be paid attention to. And in a future meeting, we can talk about how the school sites are addressing those needs. So our LCAP goal areas: student achievement, district culture and leadership, fiscal strength, parent and community relationships, and 21st century skills, college and career ready. Our entire strategic plan was built around this, and those are folded into the 8 state priorities in our LCAP. So measuring out, and I'll pass these out at the end because I only have a couple more slides to go. We have a 10,000-foot view, a 1,000-foot view, and a ground level view in the way that our LCAP is written. Starts very broad and it gets very specific with measurables. Our job as a district advisory committee is to play a role for the community as a variety of people taking a look at pieces of information and talking about what's working and what's not. So the goal is ultimately is to progress monitor our plan, is to discuss outcomes at mid-year and identify areas of strength, areas that need adjustment or need to be considered of what's going on with that. They need to pass the SMART test. Are the measurables that we put in there specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound? Do they really make sense? We put them in there. Are they really legitimate goals, or do they need to be adjusted? And then finally, this will be the body that makes the final recommendation at the end of the year in May to move forward the annual renewal of our LCAP and any adjustments we might make based on data. So our communication and process throughout the school year, we're already pumping out webisodes, parent nights, parent meetings, LCAP reviews, direct communications to family and the community, and a feedback review process. So we'll be gathering information throughout the year, meeting with the DAC at least 2 more times to really discuss this and what the data is telling us, what we're getting from our individual school sites. And in conclusion, I hope that you learned tonight the LCFF funding, how the money is distributed, how the state, the purpose and manner in which the state distributes the money. I take a quick look at our baseline data from CAAS and our map results from this fall's map test, and then ultimately start to talk about the LCAP, how it is written up, and I'll pass that out to you in a second, and the role of the DAC. Are there any questions?
So what is the target of what the DAC needs to do with our LCAP this year? Because it was written, a lot of work went into it last year, so what needs to be done this year?
So specifically, the next time we meet, all of the measurables that are identified in there will be brought forward. So this is a macro look of the data tonight, big picture. Sir, could you pass these out? So for example, all the things that we wrote about in there and the measurables we tied, we've got to take a look at them and then say, are we moving towards meeting the goal? And if not, why? There may be some times where we say, you know what? This is going to get backburnered because we were too ambitious on this particular item. But what this is all available on the website, but this is just a breakdown of the LCAP and the goals, the identified needs, and the expected annual measurable outcomes as they're written in the plan that was approved last June. And that's what we're going to be talking about specifically next time. Any other questions? All right, well, I want to thank everybody for coming out. Our goal was to have a 1-hour-long meeting tonight. I want to thank everyone for participating. We met our target, and we got all the information covered. So there'll be another meeting in later part of January this year or early February when our mid-year map is is finished, and we will send out a communication, not this evening, but in that, when we get more clearer idea of when our map window is. And with that, I bid you adieu. I don't believe it's raining outside, so have a safe and good drive home. Thank you.